So we're going to talk about Second Story. So how did the title of this book come to you?
This was real. This had about 80 or 90 different titles, one worse than the other. It just kept going. I wanted to call it Folkways. That's the first poem in the book. Mm-hmm. No one knew what that was. And even I kept forgetting what it was. No. And anyway, it just went on and on. And I wanted to call, anyway, so there's mention, well, right now, as you can see, I live on this, well, you can't see, but I live on the second story. So behind me, I don't know if you can see the ocean, but there's the ocean's behind there. So it's this idea that I live on the second story of this building, which Barbara knows. She's picked me up and the streets flood and it's terrifying. And she's always telling me to move and she's probably right. So it's like all the hurricane anxiety of being so close to the ground. But also it's a dream. I mean, there's 3 different second stories. There's the floor that I live on at the moment, this dream that I used to always have about my uncle. And I was looking out his second story window and then I do dream analysis on, and second story is like the second story about something. And then thirdly, there's a robbery in this book and it's a second story man is a phrase for someone that comes through your window. So it's like many, many things, but probably no one gets that except me, but I just did it anyway.
Well, I knew that you lived on the second story and I kind of thought about it in the hurricane poem, the Irma poem, that, you know, second story wasn't high enough, but I also thought of it being a second story. Because there, you know, there's your story, my story, another story, his story. So I thought maybe it was an unrevealed second story.
You got it. I mean, that's what I meant. I don't know if it was in there, but that's what I was thinking.
No, I got it. I don't know. So anyway, I promised I'd ask this. You often use forms in a playful manner in your poems. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I love formal poetry at this moment, but it wasn't always so. So in grad school, I remember I wrote one obligatory sonnet that was just like pulling teeth. You know, it was hard. I mean, it was a bad, it was horrible. And I was like, why is anybody even doing this? This is like stupid. You know, I didn't like it at all. And I was free verse, and I was Frank O'Hara all the way. And, you know, that's it. But then I did some collaborations with Maureen Seaton, who, you know, a really good friend of mine, and she could write sonnets like in her sleep. She just can count syllables as she goes. You know, she's just like, and I would be like, let's do a prose poem, and she'd be like, no, like she felt like I can't. You know, it was way too much for her. So slowly, we started writing like little sonnets together, and she basically taught me like line by line how to do it. I mean, and then, you know, then came the Sestina, then came the Pantoum, then came the Villanelle. And another big influence has been David Trinidad, who does, you know, he has a book called Plastic Bill, and, you know, Chatty Cathy Villanelle, or he'll have like poems that are pop culture forms. So like he has like a cento, it's called like Nature Cento, and it's just like names of movies that have nature in them. You know what I mean? So like, I just started really having fun with it. But I came to it later, you know, maybe, I don't know. Like, you know, I've been writing for a while. Like my first 3 or 4 books don't, or 5 books probably have no form at all, except for free verse, you know, and the occasional prose poem.
Okay. Would you like to read one of your formal poems?
I sure would. I think I'm going to read, just because it's so goofy. So I love the Pantoum. So this is a Pantoum that yes, it's called I Love Sex in All Its Forms. And so this is from, it's a Pantoum, which is a poetic form. And I had to go into my spam folder one day. School sent me something that I never got, and they're like, check your spam. And then when I went into spam, I don't know what I think I do know what I did. About 10 years ago, we have something here called Miami Spice for restaurants. But the Miami Spice I got to was like ladies wanting dates. And of course, and they started talking. And I was like trying to get rid of them. But I think this has haunted me to this day. So I get a lot of ladies wanting to have dates. They think I'm a dude. So this is called I Love Sex in All Its Forms, which was actually one of the subject lines. So all of these are real subject lines. And it's called I Love Sex in All Its Forms, spam email from Mindy. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and wet. Being in love, a blessing or a curse? My boner brew will make you a better screw. I just added 3 new naked photos. Being in love, a blessing or a curse? Text me, I guarantee we'll have a blast. I just added 3 new naked photos. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Text me, I guarantee we'll have a blast. What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Need a hot date with a sexy lady? What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Need a hot date with a sexy lady? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. Here are some other girls you might like. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Here are some other girls you might like. Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. It's raining men and I need one. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? My boner brew will make you a better screw. It's raining men and I need one. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and dry.
That's fantastic.
There really was. Are you available, literally or metaphorically?
Really?
Like,
that's what?
Yeah, that all of these are real. I swear to God. I swear to God. It's like just putting them in order. It was so ridiculous.
So this is kind of a cento that's
yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Wow, very creative. Yeah, it's amazing what we get. Where do you? Well, this is kind of you just answered. Where do you look for inspiration for poems? But I can see you find it everywhere. But when you're having a dry spell, what gets you going again?
My favorite thing to do if I'm just like, I don't usually have writer's block so much, but if I'm just super anxious and think I have no time and I shouldn't be writing, that's the thing that gets me like, I shouldn't because I have all these papers to grade or whatever. I'll just start with Joe Brainard's I Remember, which I go back to. Joe Brainard has that great book, I Remember, and it's 179 pages long. And it just begins, I remember, I remember, I remember. And just, I think if you do that, even if you just remember, I just said a few minutes ago, I like Joe Brainard. I mean, it'll get you going and you just keep going, I remember. And something usually, might not happen the first day, but if you show up and do it a couple of days in a row, something will happen.
Oh, great.
And then I keep a notebook of just cuckoo things, that I like,
Yeah, I think we all do that.
Mm-hmm.
Your long poem about Hurricane Irma, which I'm not going to ask you to read because it's so long, but it's just, it made me relive that whole time. How long did that take you to write, and how did you remember all those details? If you want, you could read maybe one of the days that you chronicled up to and after Hurricane Irma. But how long did that?
The shortest one. It's pretty long.
It is. It's like the whole build. It just was the whole buildup when the first spot appeared on the map, and then all the way and the poem builds the same way the storm builds. So it was just like, I thought when I was reading it again last night, how did you remember all that detail?
Well, what I did was this poem, it's called Terza Irma, and it's in terza rima, which is the same thing Dante used, right, to describe hell. And so I'm describing this other kind of wet, watery hell. And so what I did was I was dumb enough to think, I just had my notebook with me. I evacuated with John and Cindy, John Dufresne and Cindy Chinelli, and John had a notebook too. And we were just like, oh, you know, like, because we didn't know, you know, it was pretty bad. And so I kept really good notes. I couldn't sleep. It was just like a lot of anxiety. Right. Basically just chronicling what happens. Thinking if I live, then I'll have these prose poems. Well, of course, I looked at it and it was awful. It was just like, I'm going to die. What am I going to do? Why didn't I bring my blah, 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 extra medicine? You know, it was just just a lot of like babbling and nerves, but I had everything, right? I had everything. What happened on what day, where we were, I had it all. So I just went, oh, well, that was kind of a waste of time, and stopped thinking about it. And then I was teaching Patricia Smith, who had her book, Incendiary Art, is fabulous. And the title poem, Incendiary Art, is in Terza-rima. I hadn't like tried Terza-rima ever. I mean, it's the one that always was like, no can do. It was just too hard. It was too, like, you had to count syllables and rhyme, and I just never did it. And I thought, something struck me about, and hers was about fire too. And I thought, all right, I'm going to try it. But once I started, you know, I had everything. I had my notebook, but it took a year because it was so, like, it was so, you know, I wanted to do it properly, or because otherwise it was the notebook. I wish I had it to show you. I mean, it is a mess, like things crossed out and arrows and like, it's a mess. So I thought I have to control this some way. So I did it through Terza-rima, and and it could have gone on a lot longer, but I made myself stop. I was just like, okay, we're back at school now. The roads are open. I could have gone till, because it took months and months. Yeah. But then I could have been like, okay, he came and put in a light. Uh-oh, is there asbestos in my ceiling? I mean, it could have gone on, but I had to cut it off at some point. And I ended on Hurricane Maria, because I also knew how lucky I was, even in my misfortune. Like, I have a home, you know.
And you tried to outrun the hurricane only to have it follow you.
It was the first hurricane in which you had to evacuate from your evacuation point.
Right. Yeah. That was, I remember like texting you throughout that whole thing. And
you were great. I know you were great.
And just amazed at you. We had to leave and now we're here. And I kept saying, oh, it's following you.
We fled to Tampa because that was supposed to be the safe way. And then it's like, okay, this hotel, we had like 4 days or something. This hotel is being evacuated because of the hurricane. And we're like, wait, are you kidding me? And we just had to keep, oh, it was awful.
Yeah. So let's see, is there, well, maybe we should just let people read this for themselves. It's
hard to excerpt.
It is, and it's just, you have to get the whole feel of it. It's like 30 pages. Yeah. So I'm going to just urge the audience to read this poem, Terza-rima, which is astounding. And those of you who live in Florida will really relate, or Georgia, or Alabama, or South or North Carolina.
South Carolina.
Would really relate to this poem. So that said, how has your poems changed over the years? How have your poems changed?
Well, besides the form, I suppose, I think at the beginning, I've seen this arc of like, at the beginning, I was super serious. You know, I didn't have very many funny poems. My first 3 books, they were very like, it's hard being a woman, it's hard being in class, I hate it. You know, it was more like, I mean, kind of, I don't know, I just didn't have the guts to try to make a joke. And so I think then I went through like a ha period, and now I'm sort of in a period of, I'm writing all these elegies. I lost my mom this summer, as both of you know. So I'm like writing these elegies, and it's like, yeah, you can't really, I mean, you can crack a little joke, but you can't really crack a joke. So I'm kind of back to, I think tonally, and who knows? Who knows? There might be funny poems coming, but you know, I fell in a more serious lyrical space, if that makes sense.
What I discovered reading both your poem books, many books over the years, is that you are able to handle death and throw some humor, because it is true that, you know, even though we mourn our loved ones, we want to remember those parts of their lives that did make us laugh, that touched us in a humorous way. Their lives were not without humor, so why should our elegies be without humor? Yeah. So yeah, I really admire that you're able to do that. I really like the poem about your father in here.
Poker hands?
Yes. Would you read that?
Yes. And I wanted to say, I don't think I've ever told Rick this, but this is inspired by Rick's poem Toolbox. Because I hadn't seen it on the page, but I heard you read it and you were talking about your father's hands. And I remember just writing down, oh yeah, like about my dad's hands. And I just wrote down a few lines and put it away. And it's really interesting that Toolbox is in your new book and Poker Hands is in my new book. Because I remember after that reading, I was like, oh my God. And yeah, that poem was just astounding to me and just like so moving, so moving. So I will, yes, I'll read this. This is an elegy for my dad. And as I said, it was influenced by Rick's poem Toolbox, which you heard earlier. Oh, well, maybe you didn't hear it. I don't know if we're going to be split up, but you have to read Toolbox. It's really good. All right, this is called Poker Hands. The day you left us, you almost forgot to wave goodbye as you followed the anesthesiologist to the operating room, scuffing along in non-skid slipper socks, one of those surgical caps on your head. You were going to a sterile and cold place when Mom said, wait a minute, what about my kiss? You came back and then turned and waved goodbye with both hands, hands that could pull out pies from the oven without pot holders, hands that could shovel and make snowballs without gloves. All those years of baking, from the freezer to the proof rack to the ovens, made your hands what they were. Your poker hands, which dealt the cards for pitch and 21. You were serious when you played, tapping the table so we'd pay attention. You had nicks and cuts and burns you shrugged off, just like you shrugged off the surgery. We were so sure you would come around. Sore, yes. Depressed, maybe. We'd read up on all the side effects of the procedure, but you were ready, fearless, man of Bayer and Vicks, the only medicines you really believed in. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry I was a jerk so much of the time. I'm sorry I was such a spoiled brat. You only bought one luxury your whole life, a leather lounge chair, while I wanted a guitar, a new coat like the other girls, brand name jeans, a bike, and money for the movies. I grabbed everything with my weak hands that turn blue in a cold room, ricochet when the faucet runs too hot, hands that get chapped doing simple things like dishes. Now that you are no longer here, sometimes my hands are your hands when they are empty and still and grateful, when I fold them to pray the way you did, when I helped someone like you helped me the morning I woke up with a hangover after a high school party. You poured me a glass of orange juice and plucked a pickle from the jar and put it on a saucer. The combination worked, our very own father and daughter dance. Soon after, we went to the airport so I could board my first plane to travel farther than you or Mom had ever been. I stooped, having second thoughts, my Paisley suitcase suddenly too heavy. Mom told me we could turn around, that I could stay home, and you told Mom, honey, you've got to let her go. After the agent took my ticket, I turned and waved, my pudgy fingers, my purple polish already starting to chip. Then I followed the other travelers to the rest of my life, scuffling along in my sneakers, one of your baseball caps on my head.
That's a lovely poem. Really nice.
And I think too, like Rick and I both come, I mean, from different homes, obviously, you know, we're not brother and sister, but we both had, you know, came from, we both like come up in the world. And I think that, and you know, it's like unusual, I mean, maybe less usual now in academia, but like, you know, there aren't usually people like us, or there weren't always people like us here. So I think that kinship is really apparent as well.
Yeah, it is. For the final poem, do you want to pick one, or do you want me to suggest one?
Do you want? I can pick one if you want.
Yeah,
do like a short one.
Yeah,
maybe I'll do.
I really do like the 245 poems.
Oh, are they too long?
No, they're not too long. The 45 really? is kind of
okay. So there's 2 poems in this book called 45, and the first one is, well, I mentioned David Trinidad earlier, and he comes into this poem on page 20. Oh, you don't need to know, but page 27, I think. Okay, so here we go. 45. 1. My father. Sorry, let me start over. That was weird. 45. My favorite was Paul Revere and the Raiders' Indian Reservation, which I spun on my groovy GE portable record player. The band members sometimes dressed in American Revolution costumes, though they were quite Beatlesque on the 45's sleeve. John D. Loudermilk claimed he was part Cherokee and that a chieftain asked him to write a song about the Trail of Tears. I believed his lie back then, my 10-year-old imagination seeing the white songwriter stuck in an Oklahoma snowstorm, the Cherokee taking him in and fixing his car. On the flip side was the funky instrumental Terry's Tune, perhaps in the honor of Terry Melcher, a record producer who just happened to be Doris Day's son. Terry also produced songs for the Beach Boys, the Mamas and Papas, Glenn Campbell, and the Byrds. Indian Reservation ends with the impossible hope that the Cherokee Nation will return, will return, will return, will return. 2. In Charleston, South Carolina, the shooter used a .45 caliber Glock. In Missoula, Montana, and Tyrone, Missouri, .45 caliber handguns. In Santa Monica, California, a .44 caliber black powder revolver that had been converted to fire .45 caliber rounds. In Douglas, Georgia, and Bell, Florida, .45 caliber handguns. In Seattle, Washington, at least one para-ordnance .45 caliber handgun. Some reports say 2. In Oakland, California, and in Medford, New York, .45 caliber handguns. In Seal Beach, California, a Heckler & Koch .45. In Hialeah, Florida, and Washington, D.C., .45 caliber handguns. In Copley Township, Ohio, a High Point .45 ACP. In Norcross, Georgia, and Ammond, Idaho, .45 caliber handguns. In Binghamton, New York, a .45 caliber Beretta handgun. In Santa Clara, California, 2 .45 caliber pistols. When I teach David Trinidad's In My Room, a poem about a pensive boy listening to .45s, my students ask if he is listening to guns.
Isn't that amazing? Just, wow. I'm watching Rick's
the generational shift, right? That, I mean, you know, like, of course, you remember 45s, right? Those little records. I mean, I loved those things. And
I still have a container of them.
And those little thing you had to put inside.
Yellow, yep.
I love that thing. But, you know, now that it's like, as I grow older, the pop culture, you know, my students is much different, right? Or newer than, they don't know what I'm talking about sometimes. And I sometimes have to Google what's in their poems. And yeah, just the gun violence that's escalated so much, you know, since my own childhood, which I never thought about it.
Well, I'm really interested in how in the title you have 45 and then you have the pronunciation for the 5 noun, like defining it, and then how you moved from the record to the guns. Just amazing. How did you do that?
I guess, well, because of Trump, right? So I'm thinking of, you know, it wasn't lost on me that he's President 45, and we have 45s. And the third thing I could think of was like the time of innocence. And
Wow.
I mean, not innocence, I mean, but you know what I mean? Like at least people weren't getting shot at school.
At least not that we heard of.
Right, or not mass shootings so much, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an amazing poem. And then the other poem, 45,
Okay.
concentrates more on the actual 45th president. So this is an amazing book, a real tour de force. And I really like the little "See Also Trump" code name for meth.
Yeah.
At the end of that poem.
If you look this up, so this poem, it has tons of tongue twisters in it, but basically it's all just really mean. It's like what people call Trump, like all his mean, nicknames. So that's the definition. But then Trump, the word Trump, did become code name for meth when in the drug world. There was a big article in the Rolling Stone about it.
Oh, wow.
Because people just assume he was on meth because he was
nuts.
Where he was, yeah.
Well, we won't go there.
No.
Well, how many different things do you read a day, like news? Where do you, how much of your day is spent reading all this stuff?
Not so much, really.
No, you just, something just catches you
somewhere. Yeah, I think I don't read news much more than others. I do like the New York Times each morning and the Heather Cox Richardson, and but I do like Rolling Stone. I think is really quite good. I mean, they have the new. Anyway, not to get political, but they're doing the work of the January 6th Commission, really, in terms of getting people to talk, and so. I'll find, because I'm not on Twitter, Facebook, nothing. So I'm not really as connected as others, but
oh, you are in your head.
In my head, yeah.
You are, and you are.
I just take something and run with it,
Yeah, you do. Okay, finally, do either of you have any comments or advice that you want to share with the aspiring poets or our listening audiences? Denise?
I would say trust, go on your nerve. Like Franco Harris said, just like trust your gut, but also be willing to concede that, someone might have some good feedback for you and be open to it. I mean, I have to be open. I mean, I just got something this morning that was like, I wrote a little essay for something and we're going to take out these 4 sentences and I don't think this word's right. And immediately it was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I read it calmly. It's like, okay, she's right. So, I mean, you have to just like be open to becoming a better writer at all turns. And
do you have someone that you still like share nascent poems with? Or do you go back and forth?
Not one at a time, really. Not one at a time, but Stephanie Strickland, who's a poet, very different. Well, you both know Stephanie. I mean, she's very much she and I are so different aesthetically, but she's a very good friend and an excellent reader. And she's just like, nope, chop, chop, chop. So when I put books together and she's like, you're saying the same thing 3 times. Pick one of these poems, but definitely not this one. She'll like, no. And it's like, I'll take it. I feel like sometimes in our exuberant, especially I write a lot. Unlike Rick, I probably should slow down and be more careful. I'm just like, so like things can be really uneven. So when I go to put a book together, I really might have written 3 or 4 poems that like maybe 1 needs to exist, but not all 4. But like maybe I wrote 3 to get to the 4th one or something. Or I wrote 4 and I should have stopped at 2. So,
okay. And Rick, what about you?
For me, the one piece of advice I give is just to read, which seems obvious, but to read widely. I just see so many people today reading in such a narrow scope. And I just think there's so much great writing out there that you really should read widely. It doesn't, for me, I try to read work that I know is not the kind of work I want to write myself. or it might not even touch upon, you know, lives or subjects that are necessarily connected to my own, but I always learn something from that. And so to read widely and to read lots of poetry, but also to read lots of science and philosophy and history. And I'm doing an event day after tomorrow with another friend of ours from Converse, Marlon Barton, who writes these wonderful historical novels and short stories. And I'm realizing before I do this event with him, I really need to go, you know, read some stuff on the history of that time period he's working on, just so I know a little bit more of it, because he clearly has read so widely in that area. And so for me, that's the most important thing. I mean, listening to Denise talk about David Trinidad, not someone that I write like at all, but I love hearing her talk about him, and I do go read his work because I think there's so much to learn from someone like him as well, or you know, so many other writers. So for me, that's the big thing. Read lots and read widely. And
do you have someone with whom you share your burgeoning work?
I mean, not so much, as Denise said, not so much poem by poem, but often after I have a group of poems, there are few people who've been kind enough to sort of be willing to read them. Denise occasionally has been more than kind enough to do that. But Claire Bateman, who's a wonderful poet, very different kind of poet for me, but has always been very generous in terms of reading work like that. And poet Angela Kelly is another one. And then Lisa Hayes Jackson, whose poem I read earlier from the anthology, one of our former students, actually has been a great reader for me, and she'll tell me when things aren't working, which I love. So
wow, yeah, she's great.
Any final nuggets you'd like to mention or say? I want to personally thank you both for being such great writers, and it's so easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for existing.
I appreciate your doing this. I know how much work is involved in like reading all those and thinking about those books, and also thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, and really good questions, Joe.
My pleasure.